Hi everyone, comic book reviewer here. This time doing another film review, and this one is on Futurama Bender's Game. Now, as you know, Futurama Bender's Game is a 2008 direct-to-video adult animated science fiction comedy film, which of course was the third of the fourth of the Futurama films that of course made up for its fifth season. And the best way I can describe Bender's Game is like the equivalent to basically The Last Jedi. It's basically there with a story, but barely executed well. And the premise of the film is meant to follow how Bender gets into the game Dungeons and Dragons by Cuba and Dwight. And we see how Bender learns about imagination and his interest in playing the game. But of course, because of Bender getting into it too much and finding the sort of benefits of his imagination, also points out the dangers of getting into something too much and failing to learn and understand to dial it back. There is a good idea there with Bender taking his obsessions with a simple board game too far. But I think what the story suffers from, and I think this is from my own personal perspective, is that it's kind of recycling the same plot from the season 2 episode Mother's Day, which obviously is just trying to reuse the same elements where obviously we know Professor Farnsworth has issues with Mum. We get this sense that there's more about this dark matter than there is. But other than that, it just feels like it's there to try and build up another storyline from a previous season that has no real need to. And there is this moment where Leela is given a shock collar for any time she expresses anger, frustrations, and so forth, but it's not really resolved well, and other than that, they don't really know how to handle multiple stories into one feature-length film. I think the story works more if it had been with Bender taking his obsessions with Dungeons and Dragons too far, and of course, you could have even have had it with him making everything around Planet Express as basically the sort of city in that as his own personal fantasy world, and could have easily have had Fry, Leela, Farnsworth and all that setting out to try and stop Bender before he puts others in danger. This would be a good sort of critique to how I think people can kind of take their obsessions too far. They don't know how to dial it back. And I think this does remind me of Randy Starr when he got obsessed with Amber McLean from Danny Phantom. It kind of reminds me of Chris Chan with basically Sonic. It kind of reminds me more with fandoms that you do see that don't know how to sort of dial things back. I think there is an idea here for Bender's Game, but it feels like we've got Leela with a shock collar that's hardly resolved. And I get the point of her arc is meant to say how obviously using shock therapy or questionable methods to control someone's anger isn't always a healthy option. And I can kind of understand wanting to sort of reuse past elements from season 2 Mother's Day for Bender's Game with Mum and her children, but I think the episode from season 2 worked a bit more, and it got this sense that despite everything that Mum did, Farnsworth still cared about her, but I think it was just more from the whole wanting something to work perspective. Here, it just feels like it's just trying to use what's given, but it's poorly done. And I think my best thoughts about Bender's Game, it's an okay film, it's got an idea, but I think when it goes into the fantasy stuff is where I'm thinking there was a lot more that could have been done on the table. So I think the film definitely deserves a thumbs down. Not the best, not the greatest, but definitely the last Jedi in the full Futurama films, and definitely the weakest one, showing the dangers of why I think show revivals are getting worse and worse as the years progress. So, comic book reviewer here, signing out.